You assume prayer is something you do. You believe there is a worshiper, you, and one being worshipped, God. Between the two stands a distance filled by words, gestures, and intention. Yet Ibn Arabi questioned this certainty. He asked, if nothing exists apart from the real, who truly prays? The voice that speaks, the one who listens, and the one addressed, all belong to the same being. The act you call prayer might not be your act at all. It may be the movement of the real through the form of your awareness. The question then shifts from how do I pray to who's praying through me? And if the answer is not the self, what is the true nature of devotion? Ibn Arabi lived in 12th century Andalusia, a world of scholars, philosophers, and mystics. Knowledge was divided into logic, revelation, and direct witnessing. He united them by showing that all forms of knowing arise from one source, the real. His vision, called Wadat al-Wujud, the unity of being, declared that there is no independent actor, no separate existence. What appears as many is the one revealing itself in countless ways. Prayer, therefore, is not the servant calling the Lord. It is the Lord recognizing himself through the form of the servant. You think of prayer as personal, your voice, your time, your offering. But examine it closely. Do you choose when the urge to pray arises? The thought appears without command. The movement toward it feels inevitable. The words come sometimes before you think of them. Ibn Arabi explained that this impulse is not created by the self. It is summoned by the real. The divine calls to itself through the human. The servant responds, yet the response itself is initiated from beyond the servant's control. What you call devotion might be the echo of a deeper will. If your capacity to turn toward the divine is itself given, who remains to claim authorship of the act? For Ibn Arabi, prayer is the most intimate form of divine self-communication. The real prays to itself through human consciousness. When you say you, it is the real addressing the real. The one who speaks and the one who hears are two perspectives of the same awareness. In this understanding, the act of worship is not a request but recognition, the real witnessing its own reflection in the form of the worshipper. You may believe you are reaching upward, but the movement originates from beyond you. Prayer becomes not a journey across distance, but the realization that no distance ever existed. If every word is his, what remains of the one who speaks? You assume intention begins in thought. You decide to pray. You focus. You direct your will. Yet Ibn Arabi described two kinds of intention, the apparent and the real. The apparent is the decision you experience. The real is the divine impulse that makes that decision possible. The two coincide perfectly. The human will is the form in which the divine will appears. Thus, even choice is not independent. The one who intends is being intended. What you call obedience is the unfolding of a prior command. The prayer is not an act of self-direction, but of participation in the movement of the real. Can you still call it yours once you see it arises through you, not from you? Beyond words and rituals, Ibn Arabi spoke of Hudr, presence before the real. To be present is to exist without separation. In true presence, no one prays, no one is prayed to. There is only awareness aware of itself. When thought quiets and identity loosens, what remains is simple being, the same being that prays through every form. In that state, the content of prayer dissolves. What was a petition becomes perception. The self does not address the divine. It becomes the field through which divine awareness knows itself. If the essence of prayer is presence, then perhaps you were never speaking to God, but God was recognizing himself as you. Prayer often feels like sound, the rhythm of recitation, the repetition of names. But Ibn Arabi pointed to the silence between these words as the real prayer. Speech belongs to form. Silence belongs to essence. Between every utterance, there is awareness untouched by sound. That is the real, listening through you. When you pause, meaning does not vanish. It deepens. The silence between words is not absence. It is the ground from which words arise. You are not the speaker addressing the silence. The silence is speaking through you, using words as temporary bridges. Duality gives structure to worship: servant and Lord, speaker and listener. Yet Ibn Arabi taught that this division belongs to appearance, not truth. The real manifests both sides of every relation. The servant's humility and the Lord's majesty are two modes of the same reality. To perceive them as separate is to see from the surface. To perceive them as one is to see from within. In this recognition, prayer transforms from a request into revelation. The moment you see that the adored and the adorer share the same being, prayer ceases to be dialogue. It becomes pure understanding, awareness acknowledging awareness. You once said, "I prayed." But what does "I" mean in that statement? The body moved, the lips formed words, the heart inclined, but none of these belong to you absolutely. Ibn Arabi called the claim of ownership the final veil. To say, "My prayer," is to divide the indivisible. When this illusion falls, action continues, but the actor disappears. Prayer still happens, but it no longer belongs to anyone. The devotion remains, yet the devotee dissolves. What you thought of as surrender is simply truth revealing itself, that all movement, all speech, all remembrance belong to the one who alone acts through all dot when all claims of doorship fall away. What remains is stillness, not the silence of absence, but the clarity of comprehension. You see that prayer was never a transaction between two, but an unfolding of one reality in self-recognition. The words were appearances of meaning, the gestures were expressions of presence, and the devotion was the real perceiving itself through you. Ibn Arabi's revelation does not erase worship. It reveals its depth. Everything prays, because everything is the real addressing itself in unending awareness. The question, "Who is praying?" no longer seeks an answer. It resolves into quiet certainty. There is only the one, speaking, listening, and being through every form of existence. The inquiry begins with a familiar assumption that prayer is an act of a self toward its creator. Through Ibn Arabi's insight, this assumption dissolves. The servant's effort, the intention, and the presence all return to one source. The act of worship becomes the disclosure of the real within awareness. What began as separation ends as unity. The path moves from self to stillness, from "I pray" to "I am prayed through," and finally to "there is only the real praying." The discovery is not mystical emotion, but intellectual peace. The quiet recognition that the one who prays is the one prayed to